Since I know many of you are interested in the traditional book publishing process and want to learn more about the publishing industry, I wanted to dedicate today's video to a bit of industry news that happened 2 weeks ago and essentially took over all of the publishing industry Twitter sphere, and a lot of people were talking about it, so I want to make sure that you are in the loop as well. If you don't know, the entire traditional publishing industry, that includes editors at Big 5 publishing houses as well as literary agents, are very active on Twitter. So if you follow any agents or editors, you likely saw some conversation about this. If you don't follow them, no worries at all. I am here to debrief you, and it can be quite overwhelming to get involved in the publishing Twitter universe. So if that's not your thing, don't worry, and you don't need to get on Twitter just to learn more about it. I like to stay up to date on the industry and have connections from when I worked in the publishing industry, so I try to keep a pulse on what's going on, and that is what I'm going to share with you today. Prior to starting my independent book editing business, I worked at Penguin Random House, and before that, I worked at Macmillan and a top literary agency. So I do have some inside knowledge on how the industry works and where some of this conversation stemmed from. So today I want to distill the key points that I took out of this Twitter conversation that happened earlier in the month based on the posts that I saw being shared, as well as that personal experience that I have from working in the industry myself. I'm going to go over what exactly happened, why I think it happened, and what it all means for aspiring authors who are interested in getting their book published at a major publishing house. Now, this is 100% just my interpretation and my commentary on the industry news. I am certainly not going to be able to cover every part of the conversation or all the nuances of the conversation in this video, so just want to let you know that this is just my personal thoughts. If you are at all interested in the book publishing industry and you haven't subscribed, I recommend that you do so. Every week, I either cover something about the industry, something about the traditional publishing process, like this video, or I talk about tactical tips for how to strengthen and improve your manuscript. So I'd love to have you around for all of that. So let's dive right into the meat of it. What actually happened and why did publishing Twitter blow up earlier this month? So on March 11th, 4 editors, either junior level or mid-level editors at Big 5 publishing houses in the US, that includes Penguin Random House, Macmillan, HarperCollins, Hachette, and Simon & Schuster, announced their resignations. And I think this really shook the industry because it happened all at once and actually sparked a larger conversation about burnout and workload in the editorial department at publishing houses. Publishing professionals across the entire industry were sharing their own experiences with a negative work environment, and it really just started this whole conversation about potential flaws in the industry and things that editors would like to see changed. It is really important to note that most of the conversation, most of the people that were retweeting and quote tweeting and adding their own commentary were editors at the Big 5 houses that I just named. However, some of these issues certainly apply to smaller publishers as well as independent publishers, as well as literary agencies who we know are also highly involved in the industry. Also, the conversation was really centered around editorial departments specifically, and I'll get into why that's the case. But certainly some of these issues apply to other departments like publicity, marketing, and design in the publishing house as well. So there have actually been many more resignations from editors leaving publishing houses than just these 4 that kind of sparked this reckoning that happened earlier in the month. Since the pandemic, there have been more and more people leaving the publishing industry, as we know is true across many industries right now. So this is really part of a larger trend that publishing professionals have been seeing. It wasn't just these 4 resignations that caused all of this. It kind of has been building for quite a while since the pandemic. So now let's talk a little bit about why did this happen? Why are we talking about burnout in editorial at publishing houses? Why are editors leaving publishing houses, in many cases what they consider their dream job, and where are these issues in publishing stemming from? First, it's really important to give you some context for how publishing houses are structured. Within the editorial department, which are the people that are responsible for acquiring books from literary agents, then editing those books and seeing them through all the way to publication, the entry-level position is called an editorial assistant. In this position, you are typically assigned 2 higher-level editors at the imprint that you work at, and you will be assigned to help them with all of their editorial work on the books that they acquire from literary agents, as well as all of their admin. So that's handling the mail, handling their calendar, helping them with email responses, all of that, as well as helping them with the actual editorial side of things. So in my experience, as I was an editorial assistant at Penguin Random House, my administrative type work really took up my entire 9 to 5 when I was in my cubicle in the office. And then the editorial work was really nights and weekends, and I had to put in that extra time and was not paid overtime for that. It was just expected that you kind of put in extra hours to get the editorial work done on your own time. So that is where some of the conversation about burnout is coming from, because the work that you really signed up to do and the work that you're really passionate about is actually relegated to your off hours. And so it kind of becomes a cycle where you're just always working, and you're in the office doing admin, you're out of the office reading, editing, and you're just pretty much exhausted. I definitely feel for the editors who were citing burnout as one of the reasons for leaving the industry. It's also important to know that promotion timelines in the publishing industry are very, very slow. So each position can take anywhere between 2 to 5+ years to move out of and get that promotion and get usually a little bit of a raise, but sometimes not even a raise. Sometimes you just get a higher title. So the title after editorial assistant is assistant editor, and then after assistant editor, it is associate editor. All 3 of those positions are virtually the same position. You are still going to be assisting usually 2 higher level editors, but the difference is as you move up in those 3 roles, you are expected to take on more and more independent editorial responsibility, which means you are expected to start building your own list, meaning acquiring books from literary agents on your own without your higher level editors that you assist, which requires that you make the time to network with agents on your own time, make the time to review your own submissions on your own time, and actually edit on your own time, in addition to helping your bosses edit, in addition to still doing all of that admin work that I talked about taking up pretty much all of your 9 to 5 in the office. So this really results in an unmanageable workload, and it can be really disheartening for a junior or mid-level editor who is trying to work their way up the ranks, trying to acquire books, trying to edit more, do what they love, when they are still bogged down by this workload. So add to this environment the fact that salaries in the publishing industry are notoriously low, especially for living in the New York metro area. Now, they have gotten better in recent years with publishing houses trying to up their starting salary rates, and the pandemic has helped a little bit because now more and more positions can be remote, which can alleviate the cost if someone decides to move out of New York City, but they are still low. To give you some perspective, my starting salary when I started at Penguin Random House in 2017 was $38,000, and I was living in New York at the time. So as a result, most junior level employees at publishing houses have some combination of, family support financially, or they are maybe still living at home if their family is within the metro area, or they're having to take side gigs to alleviate some financial pressure. So that kind of gives you an overview of the situation that many of these junior and mid-level editors are finding themselves in, and the context that led to these conversations on Twitter about professionals in the industry being overworked and overburdened and just disheartened with their jobs. So why do people stay in these jobs at all? The highs in publishing are so high. Personally, I loved my team. I loved everyone I worked with. I loved my bosses. I loved the books I was working on. And one of the editors who actually resigned earlier this month cited that the first book that she acquired from a literary agent debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. Talk about a career high. That feels so good. And people who get into this industry are passionate about bringing stories into the world. There's nothing better than that feeling, which is why editors stay despite all of these issues with the industry and despite the workload, the low salary, and all of that. There's also this sentiment in publishing that because you're doing it as a passion job and it's because it's a dream job, you don't think about the money as much, which ultimately is unsustainable and ultimately is a really tough way to think about your job that you are doing to make a living. It does seem like more and more people in editorial are reaching this kind of breaking point where the combination of burnout and financial stress is leading them to take other career avenues. So now that I've given you an overview of the conversation that was happening and what is happening with editors leaving publishing houses, I want to go over, what does this all mean for authors, for people who are trying to get their books traditionally published and still have that dream of seeing their book in Barnes & Noble. These are just my thoughts on how these editorial resignations can impact the industry and authors at large. So first, smaller editorial teams that are overburdened ultimately means that there are fewer editors for literary agents to submit their clients' manuscripts to. Because when an editor leaves a publishing house, until they fill that position, all of the books and authors that editor worked with get taken over by other editors. So you're basically adding to the other editors' workloads in addition to having this person missing. So this is going to result in the editors that are remaining at publishing houses really likely being even more overwhelmed than they were already. That means that they're likely going to be backlogged with submissions from literary agents, and it's likely going to take them even longer to review them. I know when I was working in the industry, we were always kind of on a backlog of submissions from literary agents. It was my job to do the first pass and review them for my bosses, and there was just always several dozen in our inbox at any given time. I can only imagine that there are many submissions that editors are sitting on right now, because ultimately that is the last thing on their to-do list, because they have all these other more urgent projects that they have to get done on a specific time frame, and submissions are probably going to be lower on the priority spectrum, even though that's the work that they want to be doing. So with that, this might mean that agents are going to become more and more wary of submitting their clients' manuscripts to editors at this time, because they are fully aware, they're in that conversation on Twitter, they know that editors are completely overwhelmed right now. They don't want to add to that by just slamming more and more manuscripts on them. It could be the case that they are going to wait a little bit longer to send out their clients' manuscripts, maybe longer than the client would like, longer than they would like. But that might be the case, until maybe there's a little bit more shuffling around in the industry and some of these vacancies are filled. They might just want to take a bit more time before submitting. That also could be a positive in that authors could have more time to work with their agents on their manuscripts to get them in really polished shape for the editor whenever it does go on submission. All of this also might mean that some agents are a little bit less open to taking on new clients at this time, just because they could have a list of clients whose books they are still trying to sell right now, and that could be taking all of their time, and they might not be as willing to bring on new clients onto the team. I hope that's not the case, but it is a consequence that could make sense in this landscape. So on the flip side, I do see some positive potential ramifications of these editorial resignations. And that is, first, potentially getting some new faces in the industry. Publishing has a diversity problem, as we know, and open editorial slots, especially if some of those jobs can be remote, is a great way to help balance out the editorial teams and bring in people from more diverse backgrounds. So I'm hopeful that we'll start to see some more new faces in publishing. I have already seen several postings for editorial openings at Big 5 houses. So I hope that that ends up being the case. Also, I hope that some veterans in editorial departments get some well-deserved promotions that are likely long overdue so they can take on those higher level roles, maybe even be relieved of those admin duties and get more to the editorial work that they want to be doing. All of this would also give agents new options of people to submit their clients' manuscripts to, which is always a good thing. So those are my thoughts on the publishing reckoning that is going on right now. I hope this gave you some insight into the industry and was interesting, because I do think it's really important as an aspiring author to keep tabs on how the industry works, understand the nuances of the business side of publishing, because that is ultimately going to help you understand how you and your book fit into it, and it is just going to put you in a stronger position to traditionally publish. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this topic, about what people are saying about editorial resignations. And also, I just love to hear your general thoughts, responses to this conversation, because it is always great to hear from people who are outside of the publishing, echo chamber. So I'd love to just hear what your reactions are. I have another video where I go over some things that I hate about the publishing industry. So if you're interested in getting some more insider knowledge, I recommend checking that out. And I will talk about some of my own personal grievances with the industry in that. As always, if you found this video interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me, and it helps me grow this lovely community. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.